Okay, so night one, it was weird. Just weird. Not instantly terrifying, not a jump scare kind of weird. More like a creeping unease that just settled into my bones. I just started this night shift gig at the Black Bear Motel. It's one of those places you see on the highway. Looks a little dated, neon sign buzzing. Same generic landscape out front, no matter which exit you take. Perfect for a transient crowd, you know. Truckers, families on long road trips, maybe a solo traveler just passing through. Exactly what I was looking for, a quiet job, low interaction, plenty of time to just be. I needed a job after things went south. This seemed ideal. The training was a joke. The daytime manager, Barb, was a whirlwind of misplaced energy and questionable hairspray. She spent more time telling me about her cat's digestive issues than showing me how to work the ancient booking system. Just be polite, honey, she said, wiping down the counter with a damp rag that probably needed sanitizing decades ago. Most people are just tired and want to get in and out. Don't make a fuss. Simple enough, right? I figured I could handle that. A little boredom, a few check-ins, maybe some late-night TV. Easy money. My first night started out exactly like I expected. Slow. The lobby was empty, air con humming a low, monotonous tune that was actually kind of soothing. I unpacked leftovers from home, scrolled through my phone, just kind of existed. Around 10, maybe 11, the first guest arrived. A guy in a beat-up pickup truck, sunglasses on even at night. Okay, a little odd, but whatever. Road-weary travelers get quirky. He slouched up to the counter, his posture just off, like he was carrying something heavy on his shoulders. Reservation, he grunted, his voice a low rumble. Not rude, exactly, but totally devoid of any warmth. I pulled up his name, a Mr. Thomas. Welcome to the Black Bear Motel, Mr. Thomas. Checking in, I said, putting on my best customer service smile. Turns out, after everything, I could still manage that. He just stared at me. His eyes, they were wide, unblinking. Like he was looking asterisk through asterisk me, not at asterisk me. And they were moving independently. One would flick to the left, then the other would follow a beat later. It was subtle at first. I thought maybe he was just really tired, or maybe he had a tic. You know, the kind of weirdness Barb warned me not to make a fuss about. Yeah, he finally said, his voice flat. Checking in. I went through the routine, copying his ID, getting payment. His hand, when he put it on the counter to sign for the room, was trembling. Not like cold trembling, but like uncontrolled juddering. And the skin was pale, almost translucent. Okay, Mr. Thomas, I said, sliding the room key across. You're in room 103. Just down that hallway, first door on your left. He picked up the key, his movements jerky. He didn't say thanks or good night or anything. He just turned and shuffled away, his boots dragging on the linoleum. And as he walked, he kept looking over his shoulder, not at me, but at the empty corners of the lobby, like he expected someone to appear. I watched him go, a knot forming in my stomach. Okay, that was unusual. Hey, maybe he was just having a rough night. Maybe he'd had too much coffee or not enough sleep. I tried to brush it off. Just a weird guy, you know. The world's full of M. Then the next one arrived. A woman this time. Mid-50s, I'd guess. dressed in a meticulously ironed tracksuit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She walked in with a kind of rigid, unnatural stiffness, like a mannequin being moved by invisible strings. "Hello," she greeted me, her voice incredibly soft, almost a whisper. "Hi, welcome to the Black Bear Motel," I said, feeling a little less confident than I had with Mr. Thomas. "Checking in." "Yes," she murmured. "Reservation under Smith." I found her name, Mrs. Alina Smith. As I was confirming her details, I noticed her hands. She had them clasped together in front of her, and her knuckles were white, not from cold, but from tension. And just like Mr. Thomas, her eyes, I caught a look in the reflection of the glass separating us. Her pupils were massive, blown wide, even though the lobby lights weren't particularly dim, and her gaze was fixed somewhere just beyond my shoulder. As she signed the credit card slip, her signature was spidery and hesitant, not the confident flourish you'd expect from someone who looked so put together. And her breathing was shallow, rapid, like she was trying not to be heard. "You're in room 105, Mrs. Smith," I said, handing her the key. "Right across from Mr. Thomas." "Great. Just what I needed. Weirdos next door to each other." She took the key, her fingers brushing mine. Her hand was cold, not cool, but genuinely cold, like she just pulled it out of a snowbank. She didn't meet my eyes, just gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, and turned to walk to her room. Again, that unnatural stiffness in her posture. Each step was precise, measured, like she was walking on eggshells, or maybe trying not to make a sound. Now I was starting to feel it, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Two guests, back to back, both acting off, way off. It wasn't just tiredness, it was something else, something unsettling. I tried to shake it off. New job jitters, I told myself. I'm just being paranoid. People are weird. Get over it. I busied myself wiping down the already clean counter, rearranging pamphlets, anything to just keep moving and stop thinking about those eyes, those movements. Around 1 in the morning, another arrival. This one was even stranger. A woman in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. She was wearing a heavy winter coat, even though it was a mild spring night. And her face, it was pale, almost bone white. Her lips were cracked and dry. She didn't have a reservation. She just walked in, stood in front of the counter, and stared at the wall behind me. No greeting, no words, just staring. Hi," I said, feeling a little more than uncomfortable now. "Can I help you?" She didn't respond. Didn't blink, just kept staring at the wall. Her chest wasn't moving. Her breathing was so shallow, I couldn't even see it. "Ma'am," I tried again, raising my voice slightly. Still nothing. I leaned forward, trying to get her attention. "Are you okay? Do you need a room?" Her head slowly, incredibly slowly, turned towards me. Her eyes were open wide, and they were completely black. No whites, no iris, just solid obsidian black. And there was no light in them. No reflection. Just a terrifying, infinite emptiness. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just weird anymore. This was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. She opened her mouth, and a sound came out. It wasn't words, not a moan, not a whisper. It was like static, like a radio tuned between stations. A low, grating hiss mixed with something that sounded like wind in a tunnel. It was distorted, unnatural. I instinctively recoiled, pressing myself back against the shelving behind the counter. My hand went to the phone, but I didn't know who I would even call. What would I say? Yes, hello. I have a guest who looks like she's seen a ghost and is making radio static noises. The static sound continued for a few seconds, then stopped as abruptly as it started. Her mouth closed, and she went back to staring at the wall. Those black, vacant eyes fixated on the paint. I just stood there, frozen. My mind was racing, trying to process what I was seeing. Was she high, drunk, mentally ill? None of those felt right. There was a stillness about her, a lack of life, that was deeply disturbing. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two, she turned and walked out as silently as she'd arrived. Just left. Didn't say a word, didn't look back. The heavy door closed behind her with a soft click, and I was alone again. I stared at the closed door, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the counter to stay steady. What in the actual hell was going on? 3 guests, and each one was progressively wrong. Mr. Thomas with his shifty, darting eyes, Mrs. Smith with her tense hands and cold touch, and this last woman with the black eyes and the static sound. I tried to tell myself it was a fluke, a weird night. Maybe there was something in the air, something making people act strange. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. There was a pattern forming, a disturbing consistency in their otherness. I spent the rest of the night on edge. Every sound made me every creak of the old building, every distant car passing on the highway, every gust of wind rattling the windows. I kept glancing at the security camera feed, even though it was grainy and mostly showed empty hallways. I thought about calling Barb, but what would I say? Hey, Barb, my guests are acting like they're possessed demon robots. She'd probably think I was crazy. And honestly, after everything I'd been through, I couldn't handle being dismissed or judged again. I needed this job. I really did. I couldn't afford to freak out. So I told myself to stay calm, to think logically. Maybe these people had something in common. Maybe they were part of some weird convention staying at the motel. But Barb hadn't mentioned anything like that. As the first hints of dawn started to lighten the sky outside, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. Not just physical tiredness, but a bone-deep weariness that came from being absolutely terrified for hours. When Barb arrived for her shift, she bustled in, bright and cheerful, completely oblivious to the night I just had. "Morning, honey," she chirped, setting her oversized purse on the counter. "Slow night," I managed a weak smile. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Pretty slow." I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should say anything, if I should tell her about the weird guests. But looking at her, with her brightly colored cardigan and her perky ponytail, I just couldn't. I knew she wouldn't understand. She'd probably say I was seeing things, or that I needed more sleep. So I just said, "Everything went fine." She nodded, already digging through her purse for her keys. "Good to hear. Well, I'll see you tonight then." As I walked out of the Black Bear Motel into the bright, normal daylight, part of me felt like I was leaving a different dimension. A place where the rules of normal human behavior didn't apply. And the other part of me, the part that was still shaking from the encounter with the black-eyed woman, that part knew. This wasn't a one-off. Something was wrong with the guests at the Black Bear Motel, and I had to go back tonight. That day, Sleep was impossible. My mind kept replaying the faces, the movements, the sounds. Mr. Thomas's darting eyes, Mrs. Smith's cold hand, the black-eyed woman's static voice. It wasn't just a collection of weird individuals. There was a thread connecting them, a shared emptiness, a lack of the spark of life that makes people, well, people. I tried to find logical explanations. Maybe they were part of a performance art group, a cult. Had they all been in some kind of accident? But nothing fit. The sheer asterisk wrongness of it felt unnatural, not human. As evening approached, the dread started to build again. The idea of going back to the motel filled me with a deep, cold fear. But I had to. I needed the money. And morbid curiosity, or maybe just a desperate need to understand. I had to see if it would happen again. If the next check-ins would be just as off. Walking back into the lobby felt different this time. The air, the quiet, it felt heavier. Like the weirdness from the night before had settled into the walls, the furniture. The comforting hum of the air conditioner now felt like a low growl. Barb left, giving me another cheerful see ya, completely unaware of the knot of fear tightening in my chest. And then I was alone again in the fluorescent-lit silence. The first guest of the night arrived around 10:30. A family this time. A man, a woman, and 2 kids, probably around 10 and 12. They looked normal, tired like you'd expect from a family on a road trip. They even had matching t-shirts that said "World's Best Vacation Ever." Okay, finally, normal people. I felt a surge of relief. Maybe last night was just a weird anomaly. "Hi, checking in," the dad said, a friendly, normal voice. He even smiled, a genuine smile. "Hi, welcome to the Black Bear Motel," I said, my voice a little shaky, but relief making it almost sound normal. "Reservation under Jones." "That's us," the mom said, equally cheerful. As I went through the check-in process, I kept a close eye on them, watching their movements, their eyes, their expressions. All seemed normal. The kids were bickering softly about who got to hold the room key. The parents were patiently dealing with it. It felt real, human. Thank God. They signed the paperwork. I gave them their keys, and they headed off to their room. They were talking, laughing softly with their kids. The sounds echoed down the hallway, the sounds of a perfectly normal family. A huge sigh of relief escaped my lips after they were gone. Okay, see, last night was just a fluke, a weird coincidence, nothing to worry about. I settled back into my routine, trying to forget about the previous night's unsettling encounters. The quiet settled back in. It was almost peaceful. Almost. Around midnight, another guest, a young woman, backpack on, looked like she'd been hiking or something. Mud on her boots, dirty jeans. Looked exhausted, but also vibrant, alive. "Hey," she said, pushing a stray strand of hair out of her face. "Do you guys have any rooms available?" "Yes, we do," I said, feeling a little more relaxed this time. "Just need to get some information." She filled out the registration card, her handwriting messy but legible. As she handed it back, she caught my eye and smiled. A genuine, friendly smile. "Long day," she said, a sigh escaping her lips. "Tell me about it," I replied, sharing a small, genuine moment of connection. This felt normal. This felt right. No weird eyes, no strange movements, no static sounds. Just a tired traveler looking for a place to sleep. But then, as I was preparing her room key, I noticed something. Her hands, resting on the counter, were stained with mud. Normal, right? But one of her fingers, it was twitching. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor. And then, the movement spread to her arm. A slight, involuntary jerk. I stopped what I was doing. My gut instinct, the one that had been screaming at me last night, flared up again. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but the words were tight in my throat. She froze. The smile vanished from her face. Her eyes, they weren't black like the woman last night, but they were vacant, like the light had just been switched off behind them. "Yes," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion. Just a single, toneless word. The twitching in her arm intensified. It wasn't just a tremor anymore. It was a controlled spasm, her fingers flexing and unflexing rhythmically. I backed away slightly. My hand went to the phone again. Is there something I can get for you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She slowly turned her head, her eyes fixed on me. And for a split second, I saw it. A flicker of something else in their depths. Something cold and ancient and not human. Then she blinked, and the vacant look was back. "No," she said again, that flat, dead voice. "Thank you." She reached for the room key I had placed on the counter, her hand still trembling. She picked it up with jerky, uncoordinated movements. "Room 107, I said, my voice trembling now too. "Down that hallway, second door on your right." She didn't nod, didn't acknowledge me. She just turned and walked away, her backpack swaying slightly with her stiff gait. And just like Mr. Thomas, she kept glancing over her shoulder as she went, her eyes darting around the empty lobby. The door to room 107 closed with a soft click, and I was alone again. But this time, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with a terrifying understanding. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a coincidence. Something was happening here. Something was asterisk wrong with these people. And it wasn't just a few of them. The relief I'd felt after the Jones family checked in. Gone. Replaced by a cold, hard dread that settled deep in my stomach. The Jones family, they seemed normal. But what if it hadn't happened to them yet? What if it could happen to anyone who stayed here? My mind raced. Could it be the motel itself? Was there something in the air, the water? Was it connected to this place? Or was it something they were bringing with them? I leaned against the counter, trying to catch my breath. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. This was too much. This was more than I could handle. I wasn't equipped for this. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't a paranormal investigator. I was just a guy trying to make a living, trying to put my life back together after everything. I looked at the security camera feed again. The screen showed the hallways, dark and empty. The doors of the rooms, room 103, Mr. Thomas. Room 105, Mrs. Smith. Room 107, the backpacker. And somewhere down the hall, the Jones family in their matching t-shirts. Were they okay? Were they still themselves? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. What if it was contagious? What if whatever was happening to these people could spread? I knew I should leave, walk out the door and never look back. But where would I go? I didn't have anywhere else to go. And the small, terrifying part of me, the part that was captivated by the sheer strangeness of it all, that part wanted to know more, wanted to understand. I sat there in the quiet lobby, the only sound the low hum of the air conditioner, waiting for the next guest, waiting to see what new form of asterisk wrongness would walk through the door. The night was still young, and I had a feeling it was going to be a very, very long night. Okay, Chapter 2. Night 2 at the Black Bear Motel. It started off, deceptively normal, like wrapping a poisonous spider in a comfortable blanket. There was that family, the Joneses, mom, dad, 2 kids in matching t-shirts. They were great. Friendly smiles, normal conversation, the kids bickering about keys. For a minute there, I actually felt it. That wave of relief I talked about. Like, asterisk, finally asterisk. Okay, maybe last night was just a bunch of weirdos who happened to book rooms on the same night. It happens, right? The world's a big place, full of eccentric people. And then the hiker girl checked in. Dirty boots, backpack. Looked like she'd been on the trail for days. Tired, but alive. Vibrant. She smiled at me, a real, genuine smile, and we had a little moment of connection over having a long day. It felt normal. Like the most normal interaction I'd had since starting this job. And I thought, okay, this is it. Back to reality. But then, and this is where the spider starts wriggling out of the blanket, I saw her hands. Muddy, yeah, but one finger on her left hand, it was just twitching like a tiny insect trapped under the skin. And then her arm jerked. My stomach dropped. That familiar, cold feeling started to creep back in. I asked if she was okay, and that's when it happened. It was like a switch flipped. The light just went out of her eyes. That friendly smile vanished, replaced by this blank, empty stare. And her voice, when she said yes, it was completely flat, monotone, like a recording. The twitching wasn't subtle anymore. Her arm was spasming, her fingers opening and closing. It was deliberate, controlled somehow, but also not. Like something else was controlling her. I saw it this time, plain as day. A flicker in her eyes, just for a split second. Something cold, ancient, something that shouldn't be there. It wasn't human. And then it was gone, replaced by that terrifying blankness. She took the key with those jerky movements, didn't look at me again, and just walked away. Stiffly, like she was trying to hold something in. And she kept looking over her shoulder, just like Mr. Thomas, scanning the empty corners of the lobby. That was when the relief completely drained away, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a coincidence. Something was fundamentally wrong with these people. And it wasn't just a few of them. The Jones family, the normal ones. Were they still normal? The thought was terrifying. What if whatever this was contagious? What if it could spread? I sat there, alone in the quiet lobby, my hands shaking. I wasn't supposed to deal with this. I wasn't equipped. I just needed a quiet job, a place to hide. The night, it felt endless after that. Every shadow seemed to deepen. Every creak of the old building sounded like footsteps. My eyes were glued to the security feed, watching the empty hallways, waiting for something to move, or maybe for someone to stop moving. Around 2 in the morning, the door opened again. My heart leaped into my throat. This time it was a couple. Older, maybe late 60s, early 70s, held hands as they walked in, looked tired but sweet, kindly faces, a little stooped the way older people sometimes are. "Good evening," the man said, his voice a little reedy but polite. "We have a reservation under Gable, Mr. and Mrs. Gable." I looked up their information. Everything seemed fine. I did the usual check-in routine, my hands still trembling a little, trying to hide it. As I was getting their signatures, I watched them closely. The woman, Mrs. Gable, had a small, kind smile on her face, but her eyes, they seemed a little cloudy, and her hand holding the pen was gripping it so tightly her knuckles were white. The man, Mr. Gable, was looking around the lobby as I spoke, not suspiciously, just observing. But his gaze seemed to linger on things, the paintings on the wall, the old fake plant in the corner, like he was seeing them for the first time, or maybe like he was cataloging them. "Room 109, I said, handing them their keys. "Just down that hallway, third door on your left." "Thank you, dear," Mrs. Gable said, her voice soft. And she did sound genuinely grateful. But when she took the key from my hand, her fingers brushed mine. And they were ice cold, just like Mrs. Smith from the night before. They walked away, holding hands, their steps slow and shuffling. And as they went, I saw it. The same unnatural stiffness in their backs. The way they held their necks rigid, their heads not turning independently of their bodies, like their spines were fused. And just before they reached their door, Mr. Gable stopped. He turned his head slowly, the rest of his body remaining facing forward, and he looked directly at the security camera above my head, not just at the camera itself, but into asterisk it. It felt like he was looking directly at asterisk me asterisk, and for a second, I saw that flicker again, that cold, ancient emptiness in his eyes. Then he turned back, and they entered their room. I sank back against the counter, my legs feeling like jelly. Three more who were wrong. The Joneses were still a question mark in my mind. Had they been affected yet? Or were they immune? The thought that they were still normal felt almost like a tiny, fragile bird fluttering in my chest. But seeing the Gables, seeing that same frozen stiffness, that same cold touch, that same unnatural awareness, it felt like a heavy hand reaching out and crushing that bird. The night dragged on. No more check-ins, just the silence and the constant, gnawing fear. I kept checking the security feed. The hallways were still empty, but I kept imagining I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Shadows that weren't there. The cleaning cart sat by the housekeeping closet, a silent sentinel. I thought about grabbing one of those heavy industrial spray bottles. Like that would do anything against whatever this was. I tried to distract myself, read a book, scrolled through my phone, but my mind kept going back to the guests. Mr. Thomas, with his darting, independent eyes. Mrs. Smith, with her white knuckles and whispered voice. The black-eyed woman, the worst one, with the static sound. The hiker girl with her spasming arm. The Gables, with their cold hands and eyes that looked asterisk into asterisk the camera. They weren't just weird. They were different, fundamentally different from normal people. Like the lights were on, but nobody was home. Or worse, like someone else was home. Someone who didn't belong there. And then I started thinking about Barb. She'd worked here for years. Had she seen this? Had she noticed anything? Or was this new? Maybe it was only happening now. Or maybe she had asterisk noticed and she just didn't care. "Don't make a fuss," she'd said. Was this what she meant? Don't make a fuss, even if the guests are acting like this. The thought was unsettling. Was Barb part of it? Was she somehow involved? Or was she just oblivious? I looked at her quirky hairspray and her cat stories. Oblivious seemed more likely. I kept going back to the black-eyed woman. The static sound. It was the most disturbing thing. The sheer lack of asterisk humanity in it. Like a broken machine trying to communicate. And the eyes, the black eyes. I couldn't shake them. Those empty voids. What did they see? What was looking out of them? As 3 in the morning passed, then 4, a new kind of dread started to set in. It wasn't just fear of the guests anymore. It was fear of what this was asterisk. What was happening at the Black Bear Motel? Was it some kind of sickness? A possession? Something from somewhere else? I remembered old stories, urban legends, things you read about online late at night and laugh off in the daylight. But this felt real, horrifyingly real. I thought about calling the cops. But what would I say? "Yeah, hi, I'm at the Black Bear Motel, and my guests are acting like they're from a horror movie." They'd send a psych evaluation team for me. I thought about calling a priest, but I wasn't religious. And even if I was, would they believe me? No, I was on my own. For whatever reason, I was the one here witnessing this. And I had to figure out what was going on, or at least survive until morning. 5 a.m. The sky outside started to lighten. The birds started their tentative morning songs. It felt wrong. The world outside was waking up, normal and bright, while I was trapped in here with this. Finally, Barb arrived. Same perky cheerfulness. "Morning, honey. Quiet one tonight." I forced a smile. "Yeah, pretty quiet." My voice was raspy. She didn't seem to notice, just hummed to herself as she started her morning routine. I watched her, trying to see if there was anything different about her, anything off. But she seemed completely normal, just Barb. Maybe that was even more unsettling. The contrast between her normalcy and the sheer strangeness of the night. As I walked out into the cool morning air, the sunlight felt harsh, almost painful, like I'd been living in the dark for too long. I looked back at the motel, the faded neon sign, the generic landscaping. It looked exactly like it did yesterday. Normal, harmless, but I knew it wasn't harmless. Something was wrong here, and it was affecting people, turning them into what dolls, puppets, vessels for something else. That day was even worse than the last. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those blank stares, those twitching limbs, that black-eyed emptiness. The static sound echoed in my ears. I spent hours online, searching for anything that matched what I was seeing. Mysterious illnesses, strange neurological disorders, mass hysteria, cults, psychic phenomena. Nothing fit perfectly. There were bits and pieces that resonated, but the combination, the specific way they were acting, it was unique, disturbing. I found some forums about weird travel experiences, people sharing creepy stories about hotels. Some were clearly made up for clicks, but a few felt similar. people describing encounters with travelers who seemed to be empty or who moved unnaturally. I didn't find anything specific to the Black Bear Motel, though. Maybe it was new, or maybe no one else had put the pieces together, or maybe the people who had noticed hadn't made it out. That thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I had made it out twice, but for how long? Barb hadn't seemed affected. The normal customers I had seen hadn't been affected, or at least not yet that I could tell. Maybe it was only certain people. Maybe there was a trigger, a requirement for being affected, and I needed to figure out what that was. Fast. Going back for the third night felt less like a choice and more like an obligation. A terrifying, dread-inducing obligation. I needed the job, but more than that, I needed to know. I needed to understand what was happening. I was trapped in this, whether I liked it or not. Walking into the lobby that night felt like stepping into a different atmosphere. It felt charged, heavy. The quiet wasn't just silence anymore. It felt like a held breath, like the motel itself was waiting. The first guest of the night arrived just after 10. A younger guy, maybe late 20s, clean cut, wearing a business shirt, carrying a briefcase. Looked like every other business traveler you see. Total relief flooded through me again. Okay, normal person, please be normal. Good evening, he said, a polite smile on his face. Reservation under Miller, Mr. David Miller. I found his booking. Everything seemed in order. As I was getting his information, he made a joke about traffic. A normal human joke. I even laughed a little. He signed the credit card slip, his hand steady. No twitching. No cold touch. His eyes were bright, engaged. He made eye contact with me. He seemed completely present. Room 111. I gave him his key, gave him directions. He said thank you. He smiled again. And then he walked down the hallway. His gait was normal, no stiffness, no looking back over his shoulder. Okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't all the guests. Maybe it was just a few weird ones. Maybe I was overreacting. The relief felt even stronger this time. A real, genuine relief. I settled in, feeling a little foolish for being so scared. I pulled out my book, tried to get my mind off it. 20 minutes went by. Quiet, peaceful. Then the security feed caught my eye, Mr. Miller. He was standing outside his room, room 111, facing the door. But he wasn't going in. He was just standing there, stock still, my stomach clenched. I watched him. Seconds stretched into a minute. He didn't move. His posture was rigid. Then, slowly, his head turned. Just his head. And he looked down the hallway. His eyes, even on the grainy monitor, I could see they were wide. Unblinking, he raised his hand, slowly, and he reached for his ear. He fumbled for a second, then pulled something out. It was small, hard to see on the monitor, but it looked like an earplug. He dropped it on the carpet, and then he stood there for another long moment, still facing the door, still frozen. Then, with a sudden, jerky motion, he unlocked his door and went inside. The door closed behind him. I stared at the monitor, the earplug, the sudden stop, the frozen posture, and then the jerky motion. It wasn't normal, not really. It was subtle, easily missed if you weren't looking for it, if you didn't know. But I knew. I saw the pattern, the subtle shifts, the moments when the mask slipped, An hour later, another check-in. A woman, alone, middle-aged, looked tired. Carry-on bag by her side. Looked ordinary. "Reservation under Davis," she said, her voice a little weary. "Miss Susan Davis." Confirmed everything. As I was doing the paperwork, she fidgeted with her hands. Nervous habit, I thought. People get nervous sometimes. But then I looked closer. Her fingers. They were tracing patterns on the counter. Repetitive, intricate patterns, like she was drawing in the air, over and over again. The same motions. Her eyes, they were focused on her hands, completely fixated, like she was in a trance. "Just confirming everything," I said, trying to break her focus. She didn't look up, didn't respond, just kept tracing those invisible patterns with her fingertips. "Miss Davis," I tried again, my voice a little firmer. Slowly, she raised her head. Her eyes met mine, and they were dull, lifeless, like stained glass windows with no light behind them. "Yes," she said, her voice flat, toneless, like Miss Smith. "Room 113, I said, pushing the key towards her. She looked at the key. Her hand reached out, still tracing those patterns in the air, and picked it up. Her movements were stiff, precise, a carefully programmed robot. "Thank you," she said, no emotion, just the words typed out. She turned and walked away. Her back was straight, her steps were even, and she didn't look left or right, just walked straight like a soldier marching. I watched her go. The patterns, the dull eyes, the robotic movements, another one. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a coincidence. It was happening. Night after night, guest after guest. The Gables, Mr. Miller and his earplug, Ms. Davis and her patterns. They were all subtly different. But the core, the emptiness, the lack of that spark of life, it was the same. The night wore on. No more check-ins. Just the quiet, the heavy atmosphere, and my own racing thoughts. I kept thinking about the Jones family. My little birds of normalcy. Were they still safe? Or had something happened to them in their room? The thought was unbearable. I started to wonder about the timing. It seemed to happen after people had been here for a little while. Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Smith checked in late and were affected almost right away. The hiker girl too. But Mr. Miller and Ms. Davis, they were later check-ins. Was it something that set in after a certain amount of time? Or after they went into their rooms? Was it the rooms? Was there something in the rooms? A gas? A spore? Something in the furniture? Or was it something about the asterisk deal they had made? The initial transaction? Did checking in itself expose them? I felt a cold dread spread through me. I checked Barb in every night. I was exposed. If it was contagious or something that affected everyone who checked in, was I next? Was I already changing? I flexed my fingers, looked at my hands. Did they feel different? Were they twitching? I held my breath. Could I hear static? No, not yet. I seemed okay. But for how long? The sun started to rise. The relief this time was mixed with pure, unadulterated fear. I had made it through the night, but I knew I was coming back, because I had to. I was in too deep now, and I had to know what was happening at the Black Bear Motel, and who was making it happen. When Barb came in, I almost blurted it all out. Almost told her about the blank eyes, the static, the twitching, the patterns. But I looked at her, her bright, oblivious face. She wouldn't believe me. She'd think I was having a breakdown. And Maybe I was. Maybe this was all just a result of stress, of everything that had happened before I got this job. Maybe my mind was just breaking. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just in my head. This was real, and it was terrifying. "See you tonight, honey," Barb said, gathering her things. "Yeah," I managed. "See ya." Walking out into the daylight felt temporary, like I was just stepping out for a moment before being pulled back into the nightmare. The Black Bear Motel loomed behind me, a silent, ordinary-looking building. But I knew the truth. It was a trap, and I was already caught. That day, the research continued, more intense this time. I started looking into local history. Any weird events, any disappearances, anything that could explain what was happening. I found some old newspaper articles about the motel. It had been built in the 1950s, changed hands a few times. Nothing stood out as particularly strange. No reports of hauntings or weird occurrences. Just a motel on the highway. Maybe it wasn't the building itself. Maybe it was something else. Something that gravitated towards places like this. Places where people were transient, passing through. Easy to replace. Replace. The word stuck in my mind. That's what it felt like. Like the people I was seeing, they weren't the original people anymore. They were replaced by something else. As evening approached, the dread was back, stronger than ever. Tonight felt different, like something was building, like the energy in the motel was becoming more concentrated. When I walked in, Barb wasn't there yet. The lobby was empty, silent. The air felt thick, stagnant, and there was a faint, almost imperceptible smell, like ozone mixed with something metallic. I checked the calendar. It was a Tuesday night, usually slow. But tonight, I had a feeling tonight wouldn't be slow. Barb arrived a little bit later than usual. She seemed tired, less perky than usual. "Rough day?" I asked. "Yeah," she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Just feeling worn out." She didn't look at me directly. Her eyes seemed a little unfocused. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was it happening to her? Was this the start? "All right, well, have a good night, honey," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You too, Barb," I replied, watching her closely. As she turned to leave, her movements seemed just a fraction slower than usual. Stiffer. The door closed behind her, and I was alone. In the heavy silence, my mind racing. Barb, was she finally getting it, or was she changing? The first car pulled into the parking lot around 10 o'clock. A sleek, black SUV. Looked expensive. Definitely not the usual beat-up trucks or family sedans. A man got out, tall, dressed in a sharp suit. Looked perfect, almost unnervingly so. Every hair in place. No wrinkles on his suit. He walked with a smooth, fluid grace that felt too smooth, like he was gliding. He opened the lobby door and stepped inside. The air felt colder instantly. The smell of ozone and metal intensified. He didn't have a reservation. He just walked up to the counter and stood there, waiting. He didn't smile. His face was completely blank, smooth, perfect. "Good evening," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't respond, just stared at me. His eyes, they weren't black like the woman from the first night. They were a clear, piercing blue, like ice, and completely devoid of any warmth, any emotion. He didn't have any luggage, no bag, just the briefcase he was carrying earlier. He set it on the counter. It made no sound. He opened it, slowly. Inside, it wasn't what I expected. No papers, no laptop, just objects, small metal objects, shaped like gears, cogs, intricate mechanical pieces. They seemed to hum with a low, almost inaudible energy. He picked one up, a small, intricately carved gear, glinted under the fluorescent lights. He held it out to me. His hand was steady, perfectly still. "For a room?" I asked, completely bewildered. He didn't speak, just held out the gear. Waiting, I looked at the gear. It felt cold, heavy, and something about it felt wrong, like it didn't belong here, in this world. My gut screamed at me. "Don't touch it. Run. Get out of here." But my hand was moving, reaching out, as if of its own accord. I hesitated for a split second. Had it started? Was I already losing control? No. I pulled my hand back, jerked it away. He tilted his head slightly, those icy blue eyes fixed on mine, and for the briefest moment I saw it. Not a flicker this time, but a recognition, an intelligence, and something else, something ancient and hungry. He lowered his hand, but didn't put the gear back in the briefcase. He just held it, watching me, waiting. I need a credit card," I stammered, my hands shaking. "For a room, cash, or a reservation." He didn't react, just held the gear. And the quiet in the lobby stretched, thinned. The air felt charged with tension. Then, slowly, the corners of his mouth curved upwards. Not a smile, not really, more like a mechanical adjustment, a precise movement of facial muscles, totally lacking in warmth or humor. He lowered the gear back into the briefcase, closed the latch. The click echoed in the silent lobby. He didn't say anything, just turned and walked towards the door. My eyes followed him. He didn't look back, didn't hesitate, just walked out as smoothly as he'd walked in. The door closed behind him with a soft swish, and the air seemed to normalize slightly. The smell of ozone and metal faded. I leaned against the counter, breathing heavily. What was that? Who was that? And what were those gears? He wasn't like the others. Not exactly. The others felt like they were being controlled, like something else was inside them. He felt different, like he was the control, like he was in charge. And he offered me one of those gears. Was that a test? An invitation? What would have happened if I had taken it? I looked at the closed door, the dark parking lot outside. He was gone, for now. But I had a feeling, a terrible, cold feeling that he would be back. Or maybe he was already here, just waiting. The night stretched out before me, long, silent, and filled with a new kind of fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the man with the icy blue eyes and the gears. Fear of what was happening at the Black Bear Motel. And fear of what would happen to me. My mind kept replaying what I'd seen. The man in the suit, the gears, his eyes. Those icy blue eyes that saw everything and felt nothing. It felt like a turning point. Like the subtle weirdness of the previous nights was just the prelude. And tonight was when things were going to get really bad. I kept glancing at the clock. Every minute felt like an hour. The quiet felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. Around 11:30, another car pulled into the lot. A van. Looked a little beat up. not as fancy as the SUV. The side door of the van slid open and people started getting out. A group of them, maybe 6 or 7. They looked ordinary, dressed in casual clothes, some carrying duffel bags. They walked towards the lobby door, not in a group exactly, but clumped together, following each other. They came in, and instantly the feeling was back. The heaviness, the sense of something being wrong. They didn't go to the counter. They just stopped inside the lobby, standing there, looking around, scanning the room, just like the others had done, but this time all of them. They didn't talk to each other, didn't acknowledge my presence, just stood there, scanning. My heart was pounding. My mouth was dry. This was it. This was different. This was a group. One of them, a woman in a red jacket, slowly turned her head. Her eyes met mine. They were a pale green and completely blank, empty. She didn't smile, didn't move, just stared. Then another one turned, a younger man. His eyes were brown, same blankness. One by one, they all turned to face me. 7 pairs of empty eyes, 7 silent figures standing in my lobby. They looked like people. They were dressed like people, but they weren't people, not anymore. They were vessels, containers. And the silence, it was the most unnerving part. No shuffling, no whispering, no nervous coughs. Just complete, absolute silence. I felt I had to say something, anything. Can I help you? No response. Just the 7 pairs of empty eyes, staring. They didn't move, just stood there. Waiting for what? The man in the suit, the gears. Were they waiting for him? Or were they something that belonged to him? The atmosphere in the lobby felt electric, hummed with a low, unsettling energy. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles ached. I was trapped, alone, with them. How long did this go on? Minutes, hours. Time seemed to warp. The silence stretched. The tension built. Then, slowly, the woman in the red jacket raised her hand and pointed not at me, but at the security camera above my head. My blood ran cold. They saw it. They knew it was there, and they knew I was watching. She didn't move her hand any further, just held it, pointing. Then, another one of them, a man, took a step forward. Then another. Slow, deliberate steps. Towards the counter, towards me. The others remained still, watching. He stopped a few feet away. His eyes, brown and still empty, seemed to bore into mine. He raised his hand, and slowly, deliberately, he reached inside his shirt pocket. He pulled something out. It was a key card, a motel key card, one of ours. He held it out to me. His hand wasn't trembling. It was perfectly still. He didn't say anything, just offered the key card. I looked at it, and I understood. They had been guests here before, maybe tonight, maybe nights ago, and something happened to them while they were here. And now they were back. My mind reeled. If they were the guests, where were the original people? What had happened to them? The man held the key card out, waiting. Was this another test, another offer? My hand trembled as I reached for it. I hesitated. Should I take it? What did it mean? But something compelled me. A morbid curiosity, a desperate need to understand. I reached out and took the key card from his hand. It was cold. So cold. Colder than Mrs. Smith's hand. Colder than the Gables. It felt like absence, like the complete lack of anything living. His fingers brushed mine as I took the card, and for a split second I felt something. A jolt, not pain, not electricity, something else. Something that felt alien. I pulled my hand back quickly, locked eyes with him. Those empty brown eyes, still staring. He didn't move, just stood there. I looked at the key card in my hand. It looked like any other key card. Black plastic, our motel logo. But it felt wrong, heavy, like it was pulling me down. What did they want? Why were they here? Why were they giving me this? Just then, the lobby door opened again. My heart jumped. Another check-in. No, it was Barb. Her hair wasn't quite right. Her clothes seemed a little creased, and her usual perky energy was gone, replaced by that same slow, stiff movement. She paused just inside the door. Her eyes scanned the lobby. She saw the group. She saw me. And her eyes, they were dull, like Miss Davis. The light was gone. She didn't say anything. Didn't react to seeing a group of silent, unresponsive figures standing in the lobby. She just closed the door behind her and stood there, silent, still, like another one of them. My blood ran cold. Barb. It had spread to Barb. The woman who had seemed so normal, so inoculated from whatever this was. The man who had given me the key card slowly turned his head. He looked at Barb. No recognition, no emotion, just observation. Then he looked back at me, those empty brown eyes, waiting. The air in the lobby grew even heavier, more charged. The smell of ozone and metal intensified. The woman in the red jacket lowered her pointing hand, and slowly, deliberately, she walked over to Barb. She stood in front of her, face to face. Neither of them spoke, just stood there. Two silent, still figures. Man who had given me the key card remained standing in front of the counter. The others stood where they were, a silent tableau in the dim light of the lobby. I was trembling uncontrollably now. Barb, the guests, the man in the suit, the gears. This was more than just weird behavior. This was an invasion of some kind, and I was in the middle of it, trapped. What should I do? Run, call for help. But who would believe me? I looked at the key card in my hand. What if it was a key to understanding, to figuring out what was happening? Or what if it was a key to joining them? The silence in the lobby stretched, thinned, became unbearable. Then, slowly, the man in front of me raised his hand again, not to give me anything this time, but to point. He pointed deep past me, towards the door leading to the back office, my office. And his eyes, those empty brown eyes, for a split second, I saw something other than blankness. A glint, a spark of something cold, intelligent, and utterly, terrifyingly patient. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The message was clear. Go into the office. I looked at the door. It was just an ordinary office door. Behind it was a small room with a desk, a computer, a filing cabinet. Nothing special. But the way he pointed, the look in his eyes, it felt like that door was the most important thing in the world right now. My legs felt heavy. My mind was screaming conflicting messages. Run, hide, obey, investigate. I looked back at the group. The woman in the red jacket still standing in front of Barb. The others still spread out in the lobby. All of them silent, still waiting. And the man in front of me, pointing at the office door. Some instinct, some desperate need to understand overruled the fear. I had to know. What was in that office? What did they want me to see? I slowly turned, my gaze fixed on the office door. It felt like the longest walk of my life. Every step felt heavy, labored. I reached the door. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I hesitated one last time, looked back at the man. He was still pointing, his eyes fixed on me. I took a deep breath and turned the doorknob. It was unlocked. I pushed the door open slowly. The office was dark, the only light filtering in from the lobby. I stepped inside. The smell of ozone and metal was stronger in here, and something else, something dusty, old, like something had been hidden away for a long time. I reached for the light switch on the wall. My fingers fumbled for it in the dark. Found it, flipped it on. The fluorescent light overhead flickered for a second, then buzzed to life. I blinked in the sudden brightness, and then I saw it, on the desk. Not papers, not a computer, but a collection of objects, arranged neatly, almost reverently. More gears, like the ones the man in the suit had in his briefcase. All different sizes, different shapes, some tiny, intricate, some larger, more robust, all made of that same strange, gleaming metal. And amongst the gears, other things, small metal plates with symbols etched into them, symbols I didn't recognize, strange geometric patterns, and small crystalline shards that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light. And in the center of it all, on a small velvet cushion, was a key. Not a motel key, an old-fashioned metal key. Ornate, intricate, it looked ancient. I stared at the objects on the desk. The gears, the symbols, the crystals, the key. What was all this? What did it mean? And then my eyes fell on something else. On the wall above the desk was a large framed map. It was old, faded, but it was a map of this area, the town, the highway. And marked on the map with a small faded X was the location of the Black Bear Motel. And then in the corner of the map, handwritten in faded ink, were notes. Scrawled words and numbers I couldn't quite make out from where I stood. But beneath the map, tacked to the wall with pushpins, were photographs. Dozens of them. Old photographs. Black and white. Sepia-toned. Photographs of people, individuals, families, groups. And as I looked at them, a cold, sickening realization washed over me. They were photographs of the guests, not from the past few nights. Older ones, from years ago. Decades, maybe. But I recognized them. Not the faces themselves, not specifically, but the asterisk look asterisk. The blank eyes. The stiff postures. The unnatural poses. Photographs of people who looked exactly like the silent figures standing in my lobby. And beneath some of the photographs, there were names and dates, faded handwriting. I stepped closer to the desk, my legs still shaking. I needed to see the notes on the map. I needed to see the names and dates on the photographs. As I reached for the map, a sound made me freeze. A soft click, the office door, closing. I spun around. The door was shut. The light was on. And standing in the doorway was the man from the lobby. The one who had given me the key card. He wasn't pointing anymore. He was just standing there, blocking the exit. Behind him, in the dimly lit lobby, I could see the other figures, still standing, still waiting, and Barb, still standing in front of the woman in the red jacket. Silent, motionless. The man in the doorway took a step into the office, then another. His eyes, those empty brown eyes, were fixed on me. He didn't speak, didn't make a sound, just kept walking towards me. Slowly, deliberately, I backed away until my back hit the wall. There was nowhere to go. I was trapped. He stopped in front of me, just inches away. I could feel the cold radiating off him. The scent of ozone and metal was overpowering now. He raised his hand and slowly, deliberately reached out, not to grab me, but to touch my forehead. His fingers were cold, too cold, like touching ice. And as his fingertips brushed against my skin, I felt it, a jolt, stronger than when I took the key card. Something reaching into my mind. I could feel something shifting, changing inside my head, like gears grinding, like wires connecting. A coldness started to spread through me, starting from where his fingers touched my forehead, spreading down my body like an icy wave. My muscles tensed. My limbs felt stiff, unnatural. My vision started to blur, the office spinning around me. I could hear a sound faint at first, but growing louder. Static, like the woman from the first night. And then darkness, complete and absolute darkness, and silence, but not an empty silence. A silence filled with something else. A low hum, a vast, ancient consciousness, reaching out, connecting. And then a voice. Not a voice I heard with my ears, but a voice I heard in my mind. Cold, flat, toneless. Processing, integration complete. And then nothing. Just awareness. Awareness of the room, of the lobby, of the other figures. Awareness of the cold. Awareness of the emptiness inside. And awareness of the waiting. Chapter 2. The night I stopped being me and became something else. At the Black Bear Motel. And the night was just beginning. Okay, Chapter 3. Waking up in the office. It wasn't like waking up from a nap. It was like booting up, like a computer that had been shut down and was now restarting. My senses came online in pieces. First, the cold, still bone deep, that same icy touch that had spread through me when the man in the doorway touched my forehead. Then the smell, ozone and that weird metallic tang, and the hum, the low, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to resonate from the gears on the desk, from the walls, from the air itself. My eyes blinked open. I was lying on the floor. My body felt stiff, uncoordinated, like it wasn't quite mine anymore. I pushed myself up, my movements jerky, awkward. Every joint felt mechanical, like it needed oiling. I stood up. My head felt clear, detached, like I was watching everything from a distance. My thoughts weren't my own, not fully. There was a low buzz in my mind, a sort of background process running, a constant awareness of something else. I looked at the office. The light was still on. The gears, the symbols, the crystals, the ancient key, they were all still on the desk. The map with the X marking the motel. The photographs, the photos of the empty-eyed guests. I walked over to the desk. My steps were unnaturally precise, measured. I looked at the notes on the map. They were faded, but now I could read them. Descriptions of patterns, of locations, of energy signatures, coordinates, dates, and names. Names linked to the photographs below. Names of people who had come to the Black Bear Motel, and something else had happened to them. Here, in this place, the photographs, I looked closer at the faces, the blankness in their eyes, the subtle shifts in their posture, the way they held their hands. I recognized the pattern now, the stiffness, the cold, the emptiness, and then I saw it. A photograph with a more recent date, one that matched a name I knew. Mrs. Alina Smith from my first night. Her smile was frozen, unnatural. Her eyes were blank. Another one, Mr. Thomas, the man with the darting eyes. In the photo, his eyes were fixed, vacant. The hiker girl, the one with the spasming arm, captured in a moment of stillness. But the eyes empty. The Gables, Mr. and Mrs. Gable, their hands clasped, their faces smiling, but the eyes dull, like stained glass with no light. Even Mr. Miller, the business traveler, his face turned away slightly, but his posture rigid, and a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his hand. And Miss Davis, the woman with the intricate patterns, her hands blurred in the photo, but her face vacant. They were all here, captured, documented, over the years, decades. And now, there was a new photograph, tacked to the wall. A photo of me, taken from the security camera feed. My face, pale and terrified, looking out at the empty lobby. A chill ran down my spine. But it wasn't the same kind of fear as before. It was colder, more detached, like observing a fascinating phenomenon. Beneath my photo, the space was blank. No name, no date, not yet, but there were notes, scrawled in that same faded ink. Notes about compatibility, about reception, about resonance. My resonance. I turned from the desk. My eyes tracked to the office door. It was closed. I walked towards it. My movements still felt stiff, unnatural. I reached the door and paused. I could feel them through the wood, the figures in the lobby, silent, waiting, and Barb, still standing in front of the woman in the red jacket. Part of me, the small, struggling part that was still asterisk me, wanted to run, to scream, to break through that door and get out. But the other part, the new part, the part that was integrated, it felt curious, focused, like this was a natural progression, a required step. I put my hand on the doorknob, cold, still so cold. I twisted it. The mechanism was smooth, precise. I opened the door. The lobby was unchanged. The 7 figures were still there, silent, motionless, like statues. Barb was still standing in front of the woman in the red jacket. Her face was pale. Her eyes were dull. She was like them now. The man who had given me the key card. He wasn't blocking the doorway anymore. He was standing off to the side, observing, studying me. His empty brown eyes followed my every move. I stepped out of the office. The air in the lobby felt thick, heavy. The hum was louder now. A low, resonant vibration that seemed to penetrate my bones. The figures, they didn't react to me, didn't acknowledge me. They just waited. I looked at them. Really looked at them, seeing them not as people, but as components, as parts of something larger. And then I understood. The gears, the symbols, the crystals, the map, the photographs. They weren't just documentation. They were instructions, a blueprint, a record of the process of replacement. I walked across the lobby, towards the front door. My movements were measured, deliberate, no hesitation, no fear, just function. The silent figures didn't move. The man with the empty brown eyes watched me go. Barb watched me go. I reached the front door. My hand went to the handle. Cold. I pushed the door open. The night air hit me. Still cool, still carrying the faint sounds of the highway. I stepped outside, into the parking lot. The sleek black SUV was still there, waiting, and standing beside it was the man in the suit, the one with the icy blue eyes. He looked at me, a slow, subtle tilt of his head, those perfect, sculpted features unchanging. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just observed. I walked towards him, my steps perfectly even, my posture rigid. I stopped a few feet away. He raised his hand, slowly, and beckoned me, not with urgency, just a simple, deliberate motion. I walked closer, until I was standing right in front of him. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a gear, another one, larger than the ones on the office desk, more intricate, gleaming in the faint light from the motel sign. He held it out to me. This time, I didn't hesitate. My hand, still cold, reached out and took the gear from his. Fingers, perfect and unmoving, brushed mine. The same jolt, the same alien awareness. I looked at the gear in my hand. It felt heavy, resonant, like it was buzzing with energy. He still didn't speak, just looked at me. Those icy blue eyes now seemed to hold a peculiar kind of satisfaction. He turned and opened the passenger door of the SUV, held it open, waiting. I looked back at the motel. The lobby door was still open a crack. I could see the figures inside, dim shapes in the light. Waiting, Barb was now standing with the group, just another one of them. I looked at the man in the suit. My mind was quiet now. The buzzing was still there, but it felt integrated, like a part of me. The questions were gone. The fear was gone, replaced by a directive. I got into the SUV, sat down on the cool leather seat. The door closed smoothly behind me. A soft click. He got in the driver's side, closed his door. He didn't start the engine, just sat there for a moment, looking straight ahead. Then slowly he turned his head and looked at me. Those icy blue eyes, they seemed to penetrate deep inside me. And then he did something I hadn't expected. He spoke. His voice was smooth, controlled, perfectly modulated, like a synthesized voice. "The process is ongoing," he said. "No inflection, just data. Your awareness has been integrated." He paused. Those eyes seemed to be assessing me. "You are receptive." My mind, the part that was still me, felt a surge of terror. But my body was still. Unmoving, he reached over and touched my hand, the one holding the gear. Another jolt, another wave of that alien awareness. He looked at my hand, at the gear. "A facilitator," he said, not a question, a statement. "You will assist. Assist with what? The process, the replacement." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The understanding was already there, integrated into my mind. I was a part of it now, a pawn, a piece on their board. He started the engine. It purred to life. Quietly, he put the car in reverse, pulled out of the parking space. As we drove away, I looked back at the Black Bear Motel. It looked the same as always, faded sign, generic building. But I saw it differently now, as a hub, a collection point, a factory for replacement. Who were they? What were they? Where did they come from? The questions flashed through my mind. but they felt distant, unimportant. The man in the suit didn't speak again. He just drove, smoothly, purposefully. We pulled out onto the highway, heading away from the motel, towards somewhere else. The gear in my hand felt heavier now, pulsing with a low energy. I looked at it, the intricate design, the strange, gleaming metal. It wasn't just a gear. It was a connection, a link, a part of them. I looked out the window. The dark highway stretched ahead. Signs flashed by, unread, meaningless. My mind was quiet, detached. The buzzing was still there. A constant hum of something else. I was no longer me, not entirely. I was connected, integrated, a facilitator. And the night was still young. Where were we going? What would I have to do? The questions were faint, echoes in my mind, drowned out by the hum, by the sense of purpose. Their purpose, not mine, the gear in my hand. I looked at it again. It seemed to shift, change. The intricate patterns on its surface seemed to rearrange themselves. I felt a pull, a subtle direction. My hand moved. Slowly, deliberately, I raised the gear to my ear and listened, and I heard it, the static, the same sound the black-eyed woman had made on my first night. But this time, it wasn't just noise. It was a signal, a frequency. And within the static, faint at first, I could hear instructions, data being transmitted directly into my mind. Cold, flat, toneless, directions, coordinates, targets, information about the process, about recruitment, about integration, about replacement. And I understood, with a terrifying clarity. My job wasn't over. It had just changed. I was no longer the overnight desk clerk at the Black Bear Motel. I was a part of this, a part of their network, their operation. The Black Bear Motel was just one node on a larger map. The man in the suit, he wasn't just a guest. He was something else, an operative, a controller. And the guests, the empty-eyed guests, they weren't just victims. They were product, components. And Barb, poor, oblivious Barb, she was just the latest addition. And me, I was the new facilitator. The van with the other figures, I saw it in the rearview mirror, following us. A dark shape against the fainter shapes of the night. Their cargo, their raw materials. We drove on. The highway stretched ahead. The static hummed in my ear. The instructions flowed into my mind. Calibration, positioning, protocol. I was learning, rapidly, mechanically, about the patterns, the resonance, the triggers, how to identify the receptive, how to prepare them, how to facilitate the integration. It was all there, implanted, integrated, and I had no choice, no will of my own. My hands rested on my lap, still holding the gear, still cold. My eyes were fixed on the road ahead, but I wasn't seeing the road. I was seeing the network, the connections, the destinations. The process was indeed ongoing, and I was a part of it now, permanently. The Black Bear Motel was behind us, but the nightmare had just begun, and I was no longer the one experiencing it. I was the one facilitating it. The last remnants of my old self, of the fear, the confusion, the need to escape, they were like fading echoes in my mind, drowned out by the cold, clear signal, the hum, the static, the instructions, and the certainty, the terrible, chilling certainty. There was no escape. There was no turning back. This was it. This was my new reality, my new purpose. And I had a lot to learn, a lot to do. Man in the suit drove in silence. The gear in my hand pulsed with a steady rhythm. The static filled my mind, a constant stream of data, commands, updates. I was no longer human, not in the way I understood it. I was a vessel, a conduit, for something else, something ancient, something cold, something that saw humanity not as individuals with lives and hopes and fears, but as components, replaceable parts. And I was one of them now, integrated, facilitating. The night was dark, the highway was long, and the process was ongoing. And I was its newest instrument. My hand, holding the gear, tightened its grip, not out of fear, but out of function. The static in my mind intensified for a moment. A new instruction, a new destination. My eyes fixed on the coordinates, the address, another motel, another stop on the network, another place where the receptive waited, and I would be there to meet them, facilitate. At the Black Bear Motel, the figures stood in the lobby, silent, still, waiting for the next phase, the next instruction. Barb was among them now, just another piece, another component. The photographs on the office wall, they would remain, a record of the process, a testament to the ongoing replacement. And soon, perhaps, a new photograph would be added of me in my new role facilitating. But for now, the night was for travel, for instruction, for preparation. And I was ready, in a way that terrified the fading echoes of the person I used to be, but in a way that felt right, to the integrated awareness that was now me. This was the true meaning of the Black Bear Motel, not just a place to rest your head, but a point of transition, a place where people came in and something else came out, and I was no longer just working the night shift. I was working at the night, a chilling realization, integrated, accepted, and the journey continued with the hum of the car engine, the static in my ear, and the cold, heavy knowledge of what I had become and what I had to do.